Good evening, everyone. Stay. Let's sit for some practice. Sit with your head, neck, and trunk aligned. And bring your mind back from all the space around you. Feel the space your body occupies from head to toe. Feel the cave of space that is your most sacred temple. And feel the flow and the touch of the breath in your nostrils. Just observe the wave of breath and prana moving back and forth between the universe and the universe that you are. Cleansing with the exhaling breath, energizing with the inhaling breath. Notice how your breath automatically begins to settle, to become smoother and longer. And your body also begins to settle, begins to release its vigilant tension. Feel inside the top of your head and your forehead. And as you go through the body, feel into any tight spots gently and lovingly until the muscles just let go. Feel around your eyes and eyebrows. Into your cheeks and the corners of your mouth, corners of your jaw. Relax the muscles in your neck. And from your throat center, feel out along your shoulders toward your fingertips. Through your upper arms, and through your forearms, into your hands, your fingers, and your fingertips. Let your breath flow free and deep. Gradually becoming longer and more subtle. Dirgha and Sukshma. Relax your fingertips. Feel back into your fingers. And let your fingers go as if they could just float away. Feel back into your hands Let your hands go and feel back inside your forearms. Release your forearms. Your upper arms and your shoulders. From your throat center, feel down into your chest. Relax your upper chest and upper back. Feel into the muscles between your ribs. And let your rib cage go. Feel into the center of your chest. Exhaling and inhaling from that space. Free and deep. Relax the center of your chest. Feel down into your abdomen. Your belly muscles rising and falling with the wave of breath and prana. Relax your navel center. Feel into your hip joints. Your gluteal muscles. Feel down into your thighs. Your calves and lower legs. Your feet and your toes. Feel all your toes. And once again, feel the whole body breathe. Whole body at peace. Feel the flow of breath and mind between your navel and your nostrils. And just listen. Let your mantra arise in your mind in whatever way it comes. Feel the gentle song Draw your mind more and more still. Now feel this peaceful flow along the bridge of your nose, between the eyebrow center and nasagra. Mantra sound resonating in that space. Feel that flow through the left hand channel in the left nostril, the Chandra Swara, the lunar flow. Now feel that flow through the right hand channel in the right nostril, the solar swara, the solar flow. Now leave left and right. Let your awareness sink into the middle space, the Shunya Swara, Sushumna flow. Breath may become more subtle. Just follow the presence of the mantra in whatever form. The Shakti calls you to a chakra, follow. If it calls to follow along the spine, take that path. Or if it leads you further into this chamber of silent presence, go deep into the finer layers of the mind field. Now let the mantra thought arise again, only enough to create a song of peace as it merges in the breath from head to toe, filling you with that music. Let your palms come to your face and your eyes gently open, observing how the mind moves outwards, filling your palms with an anjali, a bouquet of fragrant mental blossoms offered for the welfare of all beings, and with thanks to the Guru, linking us heart to heart at every moment with every breath. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Mm. Well, this has been quite a week for everybody. And as always, I'm grateful for any moments of peace that we can have in the process. This latest abomination in Minneapolis happened 10 blocks the other direction. George Floyd was 10 blocks this way. This last one was 10 blocks that way. The one from last week was 3 blocks away. So we're at the bullseye. And it's been quite a week figuring out how to respond to all of this. But I think people have done pretty well. The center has been giving quite a bit of thought to how we can help people and at the same time maintain our commitments to nonviolence and to the preservation of peace as much as possible. And yet at the same time, witness for justice. And some people have chosen to attend demonstrations. Others are doing stuff behind the scenes. The center has put together a list of organizations to which people can contribute to support the people who are under duress at this point. Personally, Scott and I got in touch with the people who have been cleaning our house once a month to see if they were okay. And we got a message back that 3 of her 4 brothers have now been taken by ICE, and their family is basically broken up completely. So we sent them some funds for a legal GoFundMe page. So I'm hoping that everyone can find ways to contribute something positive to the situation. We had a meeting of the spiritual committee at the center to discuss a public statement about this yesterday. I was unable to attend because I had a conflicting engagement. But I believe that there's in the works, there's a plan for a japa practice on the full moon on Sunday. And I suspect that the Meditation Center website will have some information about that before long. But that's a wonderful opportunity to take a day of silence and to really work on establishing peace in your mind field. I always love it when it comes around because I try to sit for all 4 sittings during the day. It starts in the evening. Um, there's a sitting in the evening, my time for South Asia. Then the next one is 7 o'clock the next morning for East Asia, and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon for Europe, and then finally our time at 9 p.m. And anyone can sit for any of those four times. So um, feel free to feel free to gorge on as much peace as you can take in. So we come back to Bodhicharyavatara. I believe we left off at verse 17 in chapter 5. And Shantideva here is talking about, beginning to talk about dharma. That verse is all who fail to know and penetrate this secret of the mind, the dharma peak, although they wish for joy and sorrow's end, will wander uselessly in misery. And here, Chodron makes a point that this mention of dharma's peak is touching the chapter or touching the subject of dharma, which he will examine in detail in the 9th chapter, which is not translated in her version of the book. So she says, since this book does not include teachings on the 9th or wisdom chapter, let me say a few words about its importance. She says, none of us wants to be miserable. We all want to be happy, but we can't achieve this aim if we stay stuck in biased, narrow-minded thinking. No matter how much we long for joy, it will elude us if we continue buying into concepts of right and wrong, good and bad, acceptance and rejection. What ultimately frees us from these constricting patterns is to stop reifying our experience and to connect with the ineffable, groundless nature of all phenomena. Now, what the heck does that all mean? Right? Um, this is an expression of the Buddhist teaching of pratityasamutpada, of the momentary nature of reality. And this is, of course, one of the philosophical differences between the Hindu system and the Buddhist system. The doctrine of momentariness says that in each moment, the mind is connected from the previous or is created from the previous moment. And so there is no continuity to our sense of self in quotation marks for the Buddhists. And of course, for the Hindus, we believe that there is a self at the core of everything, a spiritual principle that is ever pure, ever wise, ever free. In practice, those two systems are non-different. They're different ideas, they're different approaches to the ultimate reality, but in practical terms, they're talking about reaching for the same experience. Well, it's not even an experience, because at that point, there is no such thing as a mind. There is nothing there to experience anything. It's just a pure, as Swami Veda used to say, the deepest meditation is an experience of pure peace, which the Buddhists describe as shunya, as voidness, and which the Hindus describe as totally full, total fullness. In reality, it's both things simultaneously. It's a paradox. So there are two different ways of talking about the same thing. It appears in what she's saying that she's sort of throwing morality out the window. No such thing as right and wrong. And what that's about is the relative nature of moral principles within the relativistic world in which we live our normal life. Most of us need to have some moral compass because we live in a world that is limited by the limitations of our mind. But once you begin to go beyond that, once you really go into the depth of experience, you begin to go beyond that world of the kleshas, of mental functioning. And at that point, those relativistic ideas sort of begin to fade away. And what's important is what takes you to that peace. And that's whatever takes you there is the Dharma. This nature cannot be said to exist or not exist, she says, or anything in between, as Shantideva says in the Wisdom chapter. And here she quotes from verse 34 of chapter 9. When real and non-real both are absent before the mind, nothing else remains for mind to do but rest in perfect peace from concepts free. This is a lovely description of the asampratyanta samadhi, of the ultimate state of meditation. There is also no better use of a human life than to realize the unfabricated, non-conceptual freshness of the mind. This is the source of all wisdom and compassion. And so here she continues with our chapter, verse 18. This is so, and therefore I will seize this mind of mine and guard it well. What use to me so many harsh austerities? But let me only discipline and guard my mind. And here is a plea against being harsh with yourself as we work to be mindful. You know, a lot of people sit and do their meditation and it becomes a fight after a few minutes, right? You know, mind is constantly throwing stuff up for us to deal with, and we keep trying to get it to concentrate. You know, we use that mantra like it's a wrench. It's not a wrench. And especially in our teaching the last several years, we worked very hard, especially in the retreats that we do, to get people to realize that it's not a matter of forcing stillness, but rather of learning to become stillness itself. Verse 19. When in wild, unruly crowds, we move with care to shield our broken limbs. Likewise, when we live in evil company, our wounded minds we should not fail to guard. For if I carefully protect my wounds, because I fear the hurt of cuts and bruises, why should I not guard my wounded mind for fear of being crushed beneath the cliffs of hell? What Shantideva is saying there is basically kind of what we've been saying about all of this business, this violent business going on in my city. Keep your balance. Keep your wits about you. Keep your mindfulness there. That's the priority, because that's what helps you keep the balance. That's what helps you avoid getting lost in the flow of thoughts and emotions that come in response to all of this horrendous stuff. I was watching the news last night as they played video of protesters breaking the windows out of a hotel in downtown Minneapolis and really getting hauled off by the Minneapolis cops because that was out of line. And I felt some anger about that just because those outbursts of violent, aggressive action place everybody at risk here because the government is looking for an excuse to declare martial law and stop the elections that are coming at the end of the year. That's that's what this is all about in the big picture. It's about being able to call off the elections, which he cannot do legally, because elections in the US are run by the state governments, not by the federal government. So the states are in charge. And he's looking for a way to try to cancel all of that because he knows he's going to lose. And he's going to lose the Congress and then he's going to jail. And he's fighting real hard to create an atmosphere where he can have enough chaos to be able to say, oh, those Minnesota people, they're terrible. And we have to We have to keep ourselves in a position to not give in to that. She goes on in her commentary. If we have a broken limb, we're quick to protect it. We pay attention, for instance, when we pass through a wild, unruly crowd. We can use the same natural response to guard our distracted, impulsive mind. In situations that could easily trigger this overreactive mind, we'd be wise to be especially alert and attentive to what's happening. I think of Alex Pretty in the middle of that demonstration last Wednesday. He's standing there. Because the immigration officers start spraying, or actually, I think it was border protection. Those are different services. The border protection people were spraying chemical irritants right in the face of some woman. And so he grabbed the woman and pulled her away from the officer that was assaulting her. And then they all ganged up on him, knocked him to the ground, pulled the gun out of his pocket, and one of them pulled the gun out of his pocket and walked away. And then they shot him 11 times in the back. Now, what was Alex thinking in that moment? Was he determined to go in and make a brave stand with his gun? No, he didn't touch his gun. He just had his cell phone out. He was recording. And he stepped in to try to save the woman who was being assaulted with this chemical irritant. It was a beautiful gesture. A beautiful gesture that got him killed. But it didn't get him killed because he was being violent. He wasn't being violent. He was certainly being vehement because this woman was really suffering. And the stuff that they're spraying in people's faces is really heinous. And it can actually damage your eyes if you get it in your eyes. He followed his heart's response. His path at that moment was to follow the Dharma and do his best to relieve someone else's suffering. And the result was really unfortunate, tragic. But if we find ourselves in those kinds of situations, then we can act knowing we're doing the right thing in the moment. And
So,
yeah,
oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt. Go ahead and finish.
go ahead.
Okay. Can you hear me well enough? Can you hear me well enough?
Oh, yeah. I thought you said
Okay.
Nirvana. And I thought, what is this?
Mhm.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So we saw a video version of the Friday interfaith vigil in Minneapolis. And the speech by Bishop Budhe um, from Washington,
Oh,
D.C.
Marianne Edgar Buddy, right? The Bishop of Washington.
Yeah, uh-huh. Her, um, who just a year ago, approximately a year last week, um, of course, forewarned the president on his inauguration day to be kind and caring. Anyway, her speech last Friday was lovely, but I wanted to bring up this part of the speech which relates to what you just talked about that Alex Preddy was doing. Um, it was almost prescient that she talked about the Good Samaritan And she said that there's a teaching to understand the Good Samaritan, whereby um, I guess, a rabbi and holy man walk by a person on the road that needs help.
Right.
And they say, what would happen to me if I help this person?
He's going to make us
And they,
impure.
yeah, so they keep walking.
Hmm.
And that the moment instead of the man who walks by, the man from Samaria, says, and this is what I thought was the beauty of her explanation of this, that he walks up and he says the exact opposite. What would happen to the other person if I do not stop and help him?
Right.
And this is what Alex did, is it not?
Yeah. Yes. And I think we can all be, as painful as it is that he died, I think we can all be proud of how his care came to the fore. And it carried him into that action without being worried about dying. I don't think he was
Yeah.
worried about dying in that moment. And I'm sure it came as a great shock, no doubt. No doubt. But he did act out of love. And I think everything we've heard about his character um, points to that being his motivation. And I also think that it's clear to everybody that that was the case. I was actually watching the news tonight and just to see how the national discussion about all of this was trending, and I think it's pretty clear that nobody believes what the administration is saying. Everybody dismisses it out of hand. So I think everybody got what was really happening there. So in that moment, for him, the dharma was to help and to not care too much about where that would take him. And sometimes it does take you to your death. It's a little bit like Dietrich Bonhoeffer walking to the gallows, whistling a merry tune, because he knew he was dying for the right stuff. He knew he was making a statement. And I think he understood that it was a statement that people would hear decades later. So sometimes our spiritual leadership says stay out of politics, and it sounds like do nothing. But I don't think that's what it means. I don't think do nothing is the point. But always acting out of our compassion and making sure that we're not acting out of our anger. I mean, that's really what's so important about maintaining our vigilance and our mindfulness in all of this.
I also just wanted to say, according to our scriptures, if we believe in karma and dharma, I mean, I feel that's why he was here in this world. That was his destiny, and it was a beautiful destiny.
No doubt he paid off some kind of sanskara in doing that. Good for him. Unfortunate for all of those who loved him. Really unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah.
Very sad.
But he set a very beautiful example.
You know, Krishna says to Arjuna, don't be a wuss. Get out there on the battlefield and do your duty. Even though Arjuna survives the battle, you know. But Arjuna and his brothers, they have some karma from all of that to pay off later on before they can finish their lives. And they do. I mean, that's part of the story of Mahabharata, which is a great drama about the nature of dharma. And it's wonderful that it's such a huge and convoluted story because these aspects of our dharma are huge and convoluted. They're not simple often. And it's just tough to know. Yeah. So people are fond of saying rest in power as a memorial to this guy. It's a real common thing that you see in these kind of situations. And that always rubs me the wrong way. Let him be at peace. He's beyond all of this crap now. You know, he's on his way to something different and hopefully to something better that this sacrifice affords for him. And that's not an effort to make it all pretty. You can't make it all pretty. It's not at all. And on the whole, I'm actually pretty proud of the majority of people in the Twin Cities because they've, by and large, have done a pretty good job of keeping their cool about all of this stuff. And I think so far that they have managed to hold up a mirror to the cruelty of the situation that's been imposed on people here. And that needs to continue.
You said you
Yeah.
said that you can't just the synchronicity or coincidence of you can't make it all pretty. And what's his name?
You mean Alex?
Yeah, Alex Pretty.
Oh, I did. I did make a terrible pun, didn't I? That was in poor taste. I didn't even realize I was doing
No, that's a synchronicity. The universe did it through you.
it. Yeah. You can
Like
erase that from your tape.
good, good, pretty. And someone said, "Let's hope the next one isn't love."
You have to laugh. You have to find some way to laugh in these situations or you're
Yeah,
gonna cry.
exactly.
Oh.
Even just 15 seconds. There's a 15-second technique of just ha 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 ha, get it out, do it hourly. You gotta do it.
Well, I put up on my Facebook page yesterday a piece by this guy that I've grown to really like from Canada, Todd Maffin. He is a guy who used to be a CBC presenter or producer. I'm not sure which. And he has all kinds of things that he does about Canada, some of them serious and some of them funny. The serious things, he's trying to attract American healthcare workers to Canada because there's a great shortage in their healthcare system. So he's developed a way to help American healthcare workers get citizenship in Canada so that they can attract some workers north of the border. But he also has, sometimes he's very funny. He did a hilarious piece about Canada annexing Minnesota. We're practically Canadian already, so we might as well just do it, which I think at this moment, a lot of people in Minnesota would be fine with that. Um, but he also put up a piece where he talked yesterday about, where he talked about in this time when every day we have this burning anguish in us all the time. That one of the things that he talks about his struggle to recover from alcoholism. And he does a beautiful job of talking in recovery terms about the principle of mindfulness, about being able to, rather than be lost in an emotion, to the way he describes it, um, imagine yourself standing aside of you and observing your emotion and saying to that emotion, "Isn't that interesting?" To cultivate a sense of curiosity about what has brought this emotion up in you. Immediately when you do that, you've been practicing some degree of mindfulness because you have stopped being overwhelmed by the emotion and you now have it instead of it having you. And you can do something more constructive with it. So I think it's a piece of that wonderful practical wisdom of the AA recovery program that I think is really useful in situations like this. Um, anyway, his name is Todd Maffin. You find him on YouTube. He's got his own channel on there. It's pretty good. Children goes on in her
What, Tom or
Todd.
Todd?
Todd,
Todd.
Tod, single D, Maffin, Maffin.
Thank you.
In certain places or with certain people, we might easily get swept into aggression or addictions. She's going right down our alley here. It's not that those people or places are inherently evil. Our mind is just still too vulnerable not to get in trouble. When we're in recovery, for example, we don't risk hanging out with our old drinking and drug using buddies. This is a piece of wisdom in the recovery programs that is all over the place. It's really important. You need to change your social system. The consequences of being taken over by addictions or jealousy, hatred, or ignorance are both painful and predictable. It can feel like being crushed beneath the cliffs of hell. And she goes into verse 21 here. If this is how I act and live, then even in the midst of evil folk, or even with fair women, all is well. My diligent observance of the vows will not decline. And Chudrin explains here that Shantideva was talking to a bunch of celibate monks who considered women to be dangerous. And of course, we know it's not the women who are dangerous, it's their own minds. And so, apologies for the misogynistic language there. 22, let my property and honor all grow less, and likewise all my health and livelihood, and even other virtues, all can go, but never will I disregard my mind. And here, when he's talking about mind from a yogic perspective, he means buddhi. He means our observing mind. All you who would protect your minds, maintain awareness and your mental vigilance. Guard them both at cost of life and limb. Thus I join my hands, beseeching you. Talking about exactly what we've been talking about here. And here Chudrin goes on to explain that in the Tibetan tradition, there are two words for mindfulness. There is Trenpa, which is sort of mindfulness in the traditional meaning of the term, the mind's natural ability to stay present. And Sheshin is alertness, staying awake, keeping at it, keeping at that sense of presence, endurance of presence, we might say. She says these qualities may be dormant at present, but they can be revived through shamatha meditation, which is basically the form of meditation that we do. So Shantideva is beseeching you to cultivate mindfulness and alertness and maintain these two qualities. Please listen to me, he says. You will never regret it. Verse 24, those disabled by ill health are helpless, powerless to act. The mind, when likewise cramped by ignorance, is impotent and cannot do its work. Here he's getting into the cause of the suffering in our mind. And we remember from our Yoga Sutra studies that this ignorance, avidya, is not only the first klesha in the list, but it's the cause of all the other kleshas. She says, the ignorance referred to here is twofold. The deepest ignorance is our misperception of reality, our dualistic perception. This is the illusion of subject and object, self and other. The translator Herbert Gunther calls this primitive views about reality. The neuroscience investigator Francisco Varela, a Chilean psychologist who was also a deep meditator and started the mind-life dialogue with the Dalai Lama, was famous for the research methodology that he created called neurophenomenology, which is a $10 word for including in scientific research the subjective experience of the subject of the experiment. You know, in conventional scientific work, we take a bunch of measurements on people, and all we do is pay attention to the measurements. And then everybody runs around chasing their tail, trying to figure out what the measurements mean. But if you listen to the subject and to their subjective experience of what happened in the experiment, it gives you a context within which to interpret that data. This is an argument Swami Veda was making all the time when he wrote about the shortcomings of research into meditation and consciousness, that they don't take into account the subjective experience of the subject. And this was Varela's mission. And there are a certain number of neuroscientists who have taken this on seriously, particularly my friend Aviva Berkovich-Ohana in Israel. And she's done just absolutely brilliant work, absolutely brilliant work. She's really gone quite far. And as I have gotten to know Aviva, we attended a conference together in Allahabad one time, and I did a paper on Yoga Nidra for that conference. And the papers were all submitted. It was for a pretty prestigious journal, the what's it called? It's not brain science. Progress in Brain Research is what it's called. And so we had a whole issue that was devoted to the papers from this conference. And so I submitted my manuscript and they kept it, and a year went by, another half a year went by, I didn't hear anything. And I thought, usually you get some kind of feedback from the peer reviewers. By this time, nothing happened. So we were at another conference in Copenhagen, and all of a sudden I get this email from the editors of the journal with the peer reviewer comments, 10 pages single-spaced of additions and corrections to my paper. And I read this thing through and I thought, oh my God, how can I ever do this? This is too much. So I was pretty blown away by all that feedback. So the next day, I'm sitting there at lunch, and Aviva comes over and sits down next to me. And she says to me, I think you got an email yesterday. And I said, yes. I said, I was the reviewer on your paper. And the reason I gave you so much feedback is I really want it to be a good paper. So I really want you to take those suggestions seriously. So when she gave me that little pep talk, I was able to go back and look at it again. And one of the things she did was to point me to another researcher who talked about some of Francisco Varela's very advanced work that he was carrying out towards the end of his life. And what he talked about was not just being interested in the contents of the person's mind in their subjective experience of the subjects, of the experiment, but rather trying to identify in their process of thought the moment just before their consciousness breaks into a dichotomy of subject and object, to begin to catch the moment of consciousness before objective consciousness is there. And I thought, holy mackerel, they're talking about japa. This is the process of deepening japa. So we actually found a way to translate our process of meditation into neuropsychology speak so that the scientists could understand what it meant. And this was a couple of hallelujahs when I realized what this gift was. And so I was able to improve the paper. And I have to say, I think it's probably the best scientific paper I ever wrote with Aviva's very significant help. But, this is the sort of thing that Chödrön is talking about here. This moment before the arising of subject and object happens in our awareness is the moment where we're on the boundary between the dual and the non-dual. It's the place that our contemplative processes are trying to take us. This is the whole point of all the contemplative exercises in Vedanta, for example. It's to bring us to that point of turiya. This is turiya we're talking about. The point where subjective and objective begins to dissolve, where that dichotomy begins to dissolve, and all you have is the non-dual awareness, the awareness of Brahman, experience of shunya, is what he's talking about. She goes on to say, the ignorance is so ingrained, we take it for granted. Yet this misperception of separateness sets off an unfortunate chain reaction. It creates a tension between you and me that leads to concepts of for and against, like and dislike, want and don't want, good and evil, and all the rest of our misery. This generates a second kind of ignorance, the ignorance of the kleshas. She's talking exactly about the first few sutras of chapter 2 of the Yoga Sutras, the Kriya Yoga, where the kleshas are being explained. Once born, our emotions quickly intensify and suffering increases. Thus, the ignorance of dualistic perception leads predictably to turmoil. Even what we consider good is poisoned by the process of ignorance. Because the things we consider good are the things that are pleasant. And at the core, we have a fear of losing the pleasant things in life. And that's where our abhinivesha comes from. And so we need to move with our mindfulness beyond that moment. So this process of staying vigilant starts with watching and feeling the motion of the breath and going deeper into that sense of objectivity that comes with that awareness. But it also goes deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper all the way to Turiya. Eventually. Probably not in one lifetime. But that's where it heads. And eventually you begin to live with a sense that somehow this is all the same thing, all the same being around me, even though the forms are different. You begin to have this intuition, God is out there playing hide and seek with me. If only I could see better, So you spend your time trying to see better, trying to be more mindful, being vigilant. This is the sense of discipline that Shantideva is talking about here. Just as ill health incapacitates the body, ignorance covers the freshness of our pristine, naked mind. The inability to see without bias and preconceptions clouds our natural mindfulness and alertness. Without a clear, stable mind, we live a fear-based life, so controlled by our emotions that we don't really know what's going on. Just as physical therapy can restore the body to basic health, shamatha meditation is the mental therapy that can restore our basic sanity. So true. So very true. And her statement there is profound in a way beyond, I think, maybe even what she even realizes, because the whole field of mental health and therapy is being taken over by mindfulness stuff now. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. Verse 25. And those who have no mental vigilance, though they may hear the teachings, ponder them, or meditate, with minds like water seeping from a leaking jug, their learning will not settle in their memories. 26. Many have devotion, perseverance, are learned also, and endowed with faith, but through the fault of lacking mental vigilance will not escape the stain of sin and downfall. And again, here, sin means neurotic habits, the habits of falling prey to our sanskaras. Kleshas and distractedness go together. Even with the excellent qualities of devotion, perseverance, learning, and faith, the kleshas will continue to capture us. Unless our mind is present and relaxed, we find ourselves frequently worked up, which, as we know, has unpleasant consequences. Duh. Yes. 27. Lack of vigilance is like a thief who slinks behind when mindfulness abates, and all the merit we have gathered in he steals, and down we go to lower realms. Defilements are a band of robbers, waiting for their chance to bring us injury. They steal our virtue when their moment comes and batter out the life of happy destinies. It's kind of a nasty way to portray what is simply a loss of the habit of being present. 29. Therefore, from the gateway of awareness, mindfulness shall not have leave to stray, and if it wanders, it shall be recalled by thoughts of anguish in the lower worlds. Well, yes, recall it. But just, call your dog back. There's a question on the teacher training exam that asks people to explain why Swami Veda once said that if you had to find another word for mind, the word would be dog. And the answer to the question is, you need to call your dog back over and over and over and over and over. In those endowed with fortune and devotion, mindfulness is cultivated easily. Through fear and by the counsels of their abbots and staying ever in their teacher's company. Now that makes it sound like the solution to our life is go move to Honesdale and hang out with Swami Rama all the time. For those of you that did that, what did he do? If you went and moved in there, he at some point, probably not long after you moved in, he'd start not talking to you for months at a time. And what he was teaching everybody was the importance of maintaining that presence inside your mind, being with your teacher inside your mind. This goes back to the yogic definition of the term abhyasa, the word for practice. Abhyasa, literally it means sit in front. Practice means whenever you practice, you are literally sitting in front of the teacher. Because of course you practice mindfully. You are taking your ego out of the picture to some degree and allowing the guru to come sit in your mind so that you can sit there with the guru and do your practice each time. Whether you're in Honesdale or Minneapolis, doesn't make any difference. You know, Swami Rama always used to say, pick a regular meditation time, and within a certain period of time, I'll be there with you. He meant it literally. And if you keep that mindful awareness with you all the time, he's there all the time. You feel it. You feel him looking over your shoulder. You know, he doesn't talk much. You know, like I've often said, I get maybe a word or two every other year at most. But if I close my eyes, I feel him. And I feel Swami Veda's smile. So that kind of vigilance keeps the teacher with you at every moment, whether you're in physical proximity to them or not. And of course, physical proximity is lovely. It can be a little disorienting. You know, it certainly was in my case with Swami Rama. I would always forget my questions in his presence. And then I'd try to ask questions sort of mechanically, and he just waved them off. It was quite funny. She says in verses 30 through 32, Shantideva talks about devotion. This is the gratitude and love we have for our teachers. In Mahayana Buddhism, the teacher is called Kalyana Mitra, or spiritual friend. But this friend does not extend to us what Trungpa Rinpoche called idiot compassion, continually feeding our neuroses or bailing us out so we get in trouble again. This friend teaches us to help ourselves. So it's not a friend in the sense that they always go along with you. I was sitting here the other day, and one of the things practices I've undertaken the last few years is to do a fast 1 day a week. I typically fast between Monday night dinner and Wednesday breakfast. And my fast is not a total fast. Baba told us not to do it that way. So I take liquids. I take some tea and coffee. I take some hot milk at night and a little yogurt in the middle of the day. But otherwise, I don't eat. But I've noticed the last couple of months, during that day, for some reason, I am noticing all these wonderful recipes on YouTube. And I'm sitting there transcribing recipes on my fast day. So I'm sitting there doing it this week, and I can feel Swami Rama looking over my shoulder and saying, So I gotta stop doing that. It's not right. So cultivate that sense of mindful awareness, and your buddhi will give you those little gifts. And they may not seem like much, you know, but most of the miracles that happen in our life are very small, very small. So small we don't even think of them as being miraculous. But I'll take a small miracle any day. Let's see. I have written she says here, sometimes my habitual patterns seem overwhelming. Just imagining the face of Trungpa Rinpoche inspires me to come back to the present. When nothing else works, The thought or words of our teachers can motivate us to stay alert and not be seduced by old patterns. I have written in the margin of the book, WWSVBD. What would Swami Vedabharati do? And over time, I hope everybody gets the gift of being able to feel Swami Rama's dark look, to be able to keep you in the right spirit of whatever it is that you're practicing. Devotion, gratitude, and love for our teachers bring us back to the vastness and warmth of bodhicitta. Bring us back to the vastness and warmth of the presence that Swami Veda always had for us. In the middle of his worst angina, when his blood sugar was going all over the place, that sense of bodhicitta, that field of bodhicitta around him, was always palpable. Whether or not they're physically present, we're always in their company. When we combine their wise counsel with a healthy fear of continuing to make the same mistakes, we find we have all the support we need to cultivate mindfulness and alertness. They do give you what you need. You don't always know they're doing it at the moment. Sometimes you have to recognize it in retrospect. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas both possess unclouded vision, seeing everything. Everything lies open to their gaze, and likewise I am always in their presence. One who has such thoughts as these will gain devotion and a sense of fear and shame. For such a one, the memory of Buddha rises frequently before the mind. Now here, wisely, I think, Children is clear to define those words fear and shame. Fear refers to understanding the consequences of giving in to the habitual tug of the kleshas. It's not fear of anything external. It's the fear of causing our own suffering. We know we don't want to keep going in that direction, that we want to stop. Shame is a loaded word for Westerners, she says. Well, that's an understatement. Like most things, it can be seen in a positive or negative light. Negative shame is accompanied by guilt and self-denigration. It's pointless and doesn't even help us slightly. Positive shame, on the other hand, is recognizing when we've harmed ourselves or anyone else and feeling sorry for having done so. It allows us to grow wiser from our mistakes. Now, from a psychological perspective, I take a little different approach to this question. To me, as a psychologist, and I've actually gotten into some discussions with Swami Veda about this. This concept is understood very differently in Asian cultures. And I think that's the source of the apparent conflict of understanding. To my mind, for people in the West, shame is the worst possible emotion someone can feel, because it's a moment when your connection to yourself, when your ability to have some contact with Atman gets shattered, and you become lost in your ego, lost in ahankara. And this is how people who suffer from shame talk. I feel lost. Sometimes people feel invisible. They actually feel like people can see through them. I've heard people say this a million times. And it's incredibly disabling. And because it is so intensely painful, people will do anything to avoid having it. And this is a lot of the reason that people get into chemical addictions, has to do with medicating their shame and finding some way to make the shame go away. Now, what she talks about is positive shame. I define as guilt. And I frankly think guilt is just fine. Guilt is the emotion that tells us that we have violated our social contract. We've violated our relationships with other people. And when that happens, when you feel guilty, most of the time you know exactly what you did. You knew it was wrong, and you know what you need to do to fix it. And if you do that, then it's finished. And there's no emotional run out from it. It's done, and you can move on. So guilt, I think, is an emotion that helps us to regulate the social contract with each other. And I think in that regard, it can be a very healthy thing to have, provided the person can respond to it appropriately. Shame, on the other hand, boy, once shame is in the picture, most people have a predictable cycle of painful emotions that they go through. And they have to go through that entire cycle before they can get their balance again. And most of the time when I start working with someone who's terribly ashamed, the length of that cycle can be months. It can be so disabling. And as we continue to work on things in therapy to reestablish their sense of self-relationship, gradually the period of their cycle of emotions gets smaller and smaller to the point where, you know, at the end, it can be just a matter of a few seconds and it's done. This is what a lot of the recovery skills in Alcoholics Anonymous are oriented towards, is helping people to do that work with themselves with the help of other people. And the thing about shame is that when we feel ashamed, we are so lost. We feel like nobody can help us. This can never be fixed. I'm permanently flawed. So what do? We hide. We go off and isolate ourselves, which is deadly, deadly when it's very intense. This is where people often get into a suicidal closed system. And breaking through that closed system can be quite a job. You know, in my days, I started out working in mental health as a crisis intervention worker. And so I was accustomed to working with people who were suicidal. And I can't tell you how many nights I sat up on the telephone, kind of like Captain Kirk from Star Trek, arguing with the computer about whether they should kill themselves or not, you know? And I got to the point where I'll use anything to keep somebody alive. I'll call the cops on them. Did that a lot. I will use, if they're Catholic, I will use their Catholic shame and guilt. You know, this is a mortal sin. You know, if you do this, it's going to be many lifetimes before you can recover from this. I'll do that to keep them alive. And in all of my efforts to do that as an intervention oriented mental health person, which I never thought I would be, nobody has ever gotten mad at me for giving them a second chance. Not one. It's been very interesting to see because I believe in people's right to end their life if they really want to do that. The thing is, those situations where people in an even-minded way want to end their life are very, very rare. It doesn't come up much compared to the other kind of situations. So, in my way of thinking, shame is a really disabling emotion. And what's important about working with shame is helping a person to reconnect to their interpersonal resources. Most importantly, helping them to reconnect to themselves. When people are having a bad attack of shame, they don't feel their emotions. A lot of times they don't feel their body. You know, this is one of the reasons why adolescents begin to use blades to cut themselves because they're trying to get at some emotion because they feel numb. They can't feel their body and they can't feel their emotions. So they start cutting their body in order to feel something. So if I can help them find a way to make contact with their emotions, then they begin to find themselves again. So reestablishing a relationship with one's spiritual self from a yogic perspective is what heals shame. How do we do that in our everyday practice? Mindfulness. Maintaining that contemplative focus at every moment is what gradually carries us closer and closer and closer to a direct contact with Atman, to, as the third Yoga Sutra says, Tada drashtu swarupe vastana. Then the seer exists in his own nature. That's the ultimate cure for shame. Oh my, we're over time here. I was going to try to get to the end of the chapter. I guess we'll do that next week. I'll close with verse 33 here. When mindfulness is stationed as a sentinel, a guard upon the threshold of the mind, mental scrutiny is likewise present, returning when forgotten or dispersed. It keeps us awake, keeps us aware. It keeps us out of the destructive side of our habits. And it keeps us moving closer and closer to Atman. Or from a Buddhist perspective, it keeps us moving further and further out of the illusion of pratitya samutpada. It's such a beautiful book. I love this text. It just has so much in it. And I'm so glad that we have chosen to look at this, especially at this period in history. Just wonderful. Once again, I have bulldozed my way through all the time. When questions or comments arise, as several people have done tonight, just be sure and jump in because they are always most welcome. Okay. Just take a minute to come back to feeling your body again from head to toe and feeling your breath. And just feel that momentary that happens. Come back toward that light. And just watch for the next 2 minutes. Om Tat Sat Brahmarpanamastu. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Wish you all a peaceful week. Beautiful, mindful time. Lots of love. See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stomaji.
Thank you.
Look at all of those hearts going off.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Grazie, Tom.
Prego.